Good evening. The President of the Republic of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, today addressed a joint sitting of the Parliament in accordance with Article 132, 1B of the Constitution, where he is supposed to do so once every year, where he is supposed to report on all measures taken and the progress achieved in the realization of national values, referred to in Article 10. Tonight, we're looking at the just concluded State of the Nation address, the second last for President Kenyatta. We'll be looking at his scorecard, handling of the youth by his government, his legacy, and of course, who will take over his government. My guests tonight are Kajiado Deputy Governor Martin Moshisho and our resident political analyst Jim India from the Emerging Leaders Foundation. Welcome to Tipping Point. My name is Frederick Muitiriri. My sign language interpreters are Teresia Washira and Michael Maithia. On to the question of the day. How would you rate President Kenyatta's performance in the last 7 years out of 10? 1 being poorest and 10 being the best. How would you rate President Kenyatta's performance out of 10? 1 being the poorest, 10 excellent. Text us on 111 444 111. Also comment on our Facebook, Twitter and YouTube at Switch TV Kenya. My Twitter handle is at Fred Muitiriri. We start off where the president said this about politics.
Elections alone cannot bring peace and unity to a divided people. For that, leaders must reach out to each other and build bridges over turbulent waters to allow the people to cross into safety and prosperity. Our state of national security will remain strong as long as we practice inclusive and sober politics.
Jim, I am definitely sure that you watched today's address. What did you make of his address in general, in like 1 minute or so?
In general, it was long, it was repetitive, it was difficult to follow through his thought process. I mean, it felt like he decided to give Kenyans the whole report that he was giving to Parliament. And so, ideally, it wasn't inspiring. It was not an inspiring speech from the head of state, where we were supposed to hear from him a couple of months back. We've gone through difficult times in terms of COVID-19. And this was the one moment where he had the nation to inspire the nation together and say, we can come out of this as a people. We can, and I had him try to allude to that, talking about crossing, reaching out, being Joshua, going to the mountaintop. But it was not an inspiring speech. It sounded like a speech I've had before. It was predictable. If you heard what he spoke when he was in Kisii, you could almost hear similar things being said. Yeah.
This leads me to this question. How would you rate him in the last 7 years? How would you rate him? 1 out of 10. Where would you give him?
So one, I already rated him. I rated him in his first term in the 2017 election, and I didn't rate him very well. So one of the things that he has done is that he has definitely the things he highlighted. For instance, he said, and he keeps talking about the kilometers of road that they have constructed. And he says, we have constructed more than they did from 1963 to 2013. He talks about how many households have been connected to the grid. It is a lot more households that have been connected to the grid. But one of the things that he doesn't talk about, for instance, is how many have we elevated from poverty? How many Kenyans, when we came into power in 2013, were living in poverty, and now that we're in power 7 years later, are not living in poverty? My assumption would be we have more Kenyans. We've had more Kenyans going hungry. We have more Kenyans not affording basic commodities. We have more Kenyans getting into poverty. And he even said the same today when he said it is a shame that 60% of the people living in this city are living in abject poverty. So that for me is, you can say all the nice things, but poverty is not things. Poverty is people. Development is not things. Development is people. Development has to be people-centered, not things. So when you're talking development, you can't say this number of roads, you have to talk about people. How many people have we elevated from poverty? And on that, for me, he scores very poorly. I would give him a generous 3 or 4.
A 3. To somebody who is saying he's fighting corruption.
Okay.
To somebody who is saying, I've brought in Raila Odinga and there's peace in the country. We're looking at the countries that surrounding us. Look at Ethiopia. There's war right now.
Yeah.
Look at what happened in Tanzania. Don't you think you could give him maybe a 6? Maybe a 6, Jim?
Again, for me, those are the things that, because the assumption is that the absence of war does not necessitate peace. We might not be at war like our neighbors in Ethiopia. But does it mean that we are in peace? Because then how do we define peace? There's structural violence that goes on in this country. And that structural violence, most of it is economic violence that is meted against the rural poor and the urban youth of this country. So that is still violence that goes on. So generally, we might not have a lot of war going on, but a lot of people in this country are fighting social, for me, those two things.
Yes.
There's a lot of social and economic violence that is being meted against the people of this country. So I'm sorry, but that whole idea of peace, I don't buy it, because we don't eat peace at the end of the day. And anytime we've gone to war, it has been because of the very individuals. You know, the president, the former prime minister, the deputy president, they have been culprits of our violence since 2007. Yeah.
Jim, let's look at, in general, the president has just tabulated for us what he has been able to achieve. Let's look at just the education. Where are we at? Where would you rate him?
So
because you're rating him.
Yes. So education is done well, because one of the things that we've had is, for once in our history, we had almost 100% transition from primary school to high school. And that by all standards, because when you look at human development, index, that is one of the measures of that you can measure and say that, the people are developing education system. So we have 100% transition to high school. And that's a beautiful thing. On that alone, I'll give him a big score on education. We have invested more money in expanding the infrastructure of our schools. We have built more schools. We have made day schools more affordable, where our children are going to, by scrapping the fee that is paid and having it much more subsidized. We have also ensured the integrity of our exams, at least over a period of time. We have expanded the TVET system. We have expanded. That expansion means more and more people are able to go through education. And in countries like ours, we know that education is one of the ways in which we are able to progressively move people towards development. So that he has done well. One of the failures that we've not done is that what then is the end product of this education? Because the end product needs to be, number one, are these people graduating college, graduating from whatever institutions that they're coming from, and are they able to find jobs? But number two, a majority of the people, of the students in this country do not have post-secondary school education. A majority only are left at secondary education. So most of the youth of this country just have a basic secondary education. So how are we integrating these young people who don't have post-secondary education into the employment sector? Because the employment sector does not at all.
16 million youths are unemployed.
If I go with my KCSE certificate, no one has ever asked me for my KCSE certificate because it is rendered useless. So if we have that kind of economy, but majority of your young people only have a secondary school certificate, how are we creating opportunities for them? Are we injecting more money into the informal sector and ensuring that that sector, because it employs more of our young people, then is able to absorb those people?
There's something, Jim, you're talking about that we have been able to have 100% transition. But look, teachers are complaining. One class, you are having more than 60 students. Yeah. Another class, you're having 100 students. Would you still give him a good score? Because you're talking about the education sector has been able to do 1, 2, 3 things. But look at the quality of education that we are getting in schools. Teachers are complaining every day.
So teachers are complaining. Now, one, you also have to admit that the remuneration of teachers has been fairly better than it was. It's not where it should be, but it has been fairly better.
After strikes.
After a lot of course, that is the language the government understands. Governments all over the world hear the language of strikes and protests. But it is slightly better, not the best, but it is slightly better than it was in the past. But of course, there's the issue of teacher to student ratio, which is a problem. But that's a problem across the board. When you're talking about police to civilian ratio, when you're talking about doctor to patient ratio, that's a problem across the board. So number one, in countries like ours, we do not have the luxury of talking about the ratio. We first have to talk about access.
Yes.
So once we talk about access and get it right at the access point, then now we have to start talking about, okay, what now is the quality of whatever education that we're accessing. And you can see now we are moving towards the competency-based curriculum. That's why we're saying, now that we've gotten it right at the primary school level? How do we ensure that we're preparing students who are ready for the 21st century market? And so we're going the competent CBC direction. So I agree with you that there's a lot of our classrooms are congested, but think about 2002 when Mwai Kibaki took over and introduced free primary education. It is not the same as it was in 2002. Several years later, we have made strides. So I'm not drumming up support for the president. We are basically trying to be fair here and say, give due where necessary, and say, okay, there's room for improvement. And I think in education, there's been progress, but there's definitely room for improvement.
Talk about corruption. This is what we've talked about since the country got its independence in 1963. We've talked about corruption every year. And since this current president, came into power in 2013, we've been speaking about corruption every single year. Unfortunately, today, he did not say anything about corruption. Where are we at? How would you rate him?
Definitely, we're doing horrible. It's a horrible performance by this regime. So when Mwai Kibaki took over, we thought we had seen all the scandals that we could have ever seen, and then before we know it, we had scandal after scandal after scandal, and then the Uhuruto came into power, and I want to insist on calling them Uhuruto. I want to insist on doing that because
we are not going to divorce them.
Yes, there is a deliberate attempt by Kenyans and slightly even by the media to divorce these two and make it look like there's a...
They're no longer, Jim. Let's be fair to them. They're no longer working together. We all know that.
That's on them. That's really not on us. But we elect them as a pair. We voted for them as a pair.
Fair enough.
If they're not working together, that's on them.
Fair enough.
So when Uhuruto came into power, for instance, the president came into power with the assumption that this is a man who had enough wealth, that this is a man who was going to ensure that our public money was protected because he had no interest in stealing our public money. Now, several years into his presidency, we have seen probably the most bizarre scandals that they had to be seen. Today, for instance, in the dailies, you're reading about KEMSA. We're losing money through mobile phones, people making phone calls, and Kenyans are losing billions through phone calls. So he has done big talk on corruption, but very little action on corruption. There's even a time he surprised us and did a whole list to Parliament and said,
I remember, 2015.
This is the list. During that State of the Nation address, it was a very grand gesture.
I remember.
But we don't know what happened to that. And today he has given another report to the House from the DPP's office.
Yes.
And it would be interesting to know the content of that report. Is he reporting to Parliament? Because he didn't say anything about corruption, but he did give an extra report to Parliament from the DPP's office. So it would be interesting to hear, for instance, what's in that report. In his opinion, are we making progress? We've not seen any arrests.
We see them, but they are released after 2 days.
Exactly. And asset recovery. So there's been a bit of asset recovery, though, to be honest, that some of the money that has been lost, we have recovered some of it. It is minimal, but we have recovered some of that money. So this president and this presidency has been big. They've talked big on corruption, but they have acted minimally.
So zero.
And the problem is, at one time now, we politicized the whole war on corruption because, for instance, some people are saying today that the reason why he didn't talk about corruption is because the person whom used to be the face of corruption is no longer, as you say, and as many Kenyans are saying, part of the presidency.
Hold still. We are taking a short break. But before we do that, earlier on, I asked you, how would you rate President Uhuru Kenyatta's regime or legacy? How would you rate his performance the last 7 years? 1 to 10, 1 being the poorest and 10 being the very best. Talk to me via our SMS line that is on 111 444 111. We take a short break. We are with Jim India from Emerging Leaders Foundation. A short break. We'll be back with more. Welcome back. I asked you earlier on, how would you rate President Kenyatta's performance in the last 7 years? Out of 10, 1 being the poorest and 10 being the best. Extras on 111 444 111. Also comment on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. We are live on all those platforms. And my Twitter handle is at Fred Mwitiriri. Joining us right now is Kajiado Deputy Governor Martin Moshisho. Martin, karibu sana.
Thank you very much.
I believe you saw today's State of the Nation address. Rate your president, because he's your Jubilee leader.
Yes.
Rate him out of 10. How would you say he has been doing the last 7 years?
Well, I will give him 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10.
Why?
Yes.
Why?
Because of what he has been able to achieve. I want to say that I've not been able to follow the entire speech of the president. I was in Mashinani, that's why I came late. But I read in the highlights or just went through his speech and some tremendous progress that the country has been able to make. When you talk of title deeds that he had mentioned, 4.5 million title deeds, almost a record of 6 million of the previous regime since 1963 to 2013. If you can imagine, from 63 to 2013, and I'm able to produce 6 million title deeds, and the Jubilee government have been able to produce 4.5. It's a tremendous job done. Something else I've been able to follow is actually on the UHC and health. He talked of the pilot on UHC being able to be completed, and we are in a transition to roll out the UHC in the rest of the counties. That's a good progress. One of the big wins that I have seen in his speech, especially on health, is the issue of NHIF. If we are able to improve NHIF and be able to even handle calamities and all these things like COVID-19, that's a big win. He talked of mental illness that is really a problem.
That's a plan. That's a plan.
In the moment, he mentioned plans that the government is going to put in place to make sure that they tackle such a problem that we are facing currently. Talking of an ultra modern facility that is proposing to be put up by the country, and suggested
proposals are very good.
And
We've had them for a long time.
And suggested to the National Assemblies and Senate to make sure that they have allocated a lot of funds. I mean, we are in the right direction.
Hold still, Board Deputy Governor. Let me take you back to UHC. You've mentioned about it. But the 4 counties where it was started, one of them being Nyeri.
Yes.
The residents are saying it's a flop. So even if we roll out to the whole country, it's a flop.
It is. As a deputy governor, I have been able to sit in the Council of Governors meetings, and we received feedback from the 4 counties. The feedback is tremendous.
Nyeri,
yes, yes,
Kisumu.
yes. The feedback is tremendous.
Jim, have you had this information? Because the resident that you talk to, they tell you you go to hospital, and some of the services that you are told are free are no longer free.
What I know, the government has really allocated a lot of money in terms of billions to every county to tackle UHC. And as a council, we have received feedback, and feedback is really great. I know there are a number of areas that needs improvement. We noted, for example, the issue of human resource. It was a big issue, and we said going forward we have to improve the issue of human resource to be able to have a very strong UHC in the rest of the county.
I give you for that. Kajiado County, will you be able to manage free healthcare for all of your residents?
With resources devolved and given to
the question here is, will you be able to manage as a county in Kajiado?
I have said with resources being released, because
yes,
I think one of the biggest hurdles that we have had as devolved units is actually the flow of funds. So if we are going to improve funds flowing to the counties, we are able to do a very good job. And I think at a time like this where we're having a BBI conversation, one of the things that we are really making sure is to have funds flow without interruption, timely release of funds to the counties. Counties will be able to do a very good job.
Jim, he's talking about UHC,
yeah.
but we have seen the progress in this country. The money that is allocated to health docket, do you think it's going to manage the whole 47 counties? Are we going to have another project that is the Big Four agenda that is flopping?
So ideally, as we say, UHC is a brilliant idea. It's brilliant because it took into, and the numbers around UHC are startling. For instance, in Kisumu, where we had the UHC rolled out, the number of people dying, because of malaria, and infants dying early just because of
mortality,
malaria, that has reduced significantly. Okay, just because UHC was rolled out in that area. Now there are issues, for instance, on you go to the hospital and they do not have drugs. Because KEMSA has not supplied drugs to those hospitals because those hospitals still have not paid. And so there's a lot of issues, especially procurement-wise and resource-wise, as the Deputy Governor is saying. But the idea behind it is impressive, in my opinion, because I happen to come from one of the counties where UHC was piloted. And I can tell you, for instance, the significance, and even just from the studies, the difference that it has made. So if this was piloted in the whole country, we will not achieve 100% the idea that we have. That is a reality that we have to be alive to. We will not achieve it. But the difference that it will make in the lives of the Kenyans, at least millions of Kenyans, that will be a tremendous difference. We will be saving more lives, and we'll be assuring that more Kenyans have access to healthcare. And remember that we're also expanding how many Kenyans are able to access NHIF, and we're also ensuring that we're expanding the infrastructure of those hospitals, and health is a devolved function. So we're also ensuring that the devolution, if at all we increase the amount of allocation that we're giving to the counties, now we have to ensure that public participation, the people participate in the development agenda in their counties to ensure that every coin is accounted for and that the money goes to the right place.
Thank you. This is what the president had to say. He is now the new Moses in the country. We had a Joshua in 2017. Now we have a new Moses, and this is what he had to say.
Moses in the Bible, who sat at the top of Mount Nebo and saw the future that the people of Israel were about to cross into the promised land. I too have seen our future.
Now, the Moses of the Bible, we get into a little bit of politics. This is what happened in the Bible. Let me just read you. He took this from, I think, Deuteronomy. Yes, Deuteronomy 34, 1 to 10, where it says, the Bible itself, then Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is across from Jericho. And the Lord showed him all the land of Gilead as far as Dan. I have caused you, it says, to see it with your own eyes, but you shall not cross over there. Uhuru Kenyatta is saying is the Moses. And so, 5 is saying, so Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab. Now, Joshua, the son of Nun, was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hand on him. So the children of Israel heeded him and did as the Lord had commanded. That is Deuteronomy 34, 1 to 10. He alluded that he is the new Moses. In politics, they keep telling us there is nothing, the script in politics is well scripted to mean something. Moses is dying at this mountain Nebo, we are being told. Are we seeing a probability of a president? Because people have been saying that maybe the president needs a prime minister. Are we seeing a probability of the president saying, I do not want this thing?
So one, we know that Moses does not cross over to the promised land. So anyone who has been saying that the president will vie for another term, will suspend, at least you have been answered in that speech. But I think the president's speechwriters have also to stop this laziness of copying speeches from all over the world. Because we all know the origin of that is, Martin Luther saying, I've been to the mountaintop and I have seen, that glory days and all that. That's from Martin Luther King. And in that moment, that speech resonated with the people that he was speaking to. In this moment, what promised land have you seen? You have not even given us the picture of that promised land. You have been around for 7 years. And now you're telling us that there's another promised land. Leave alone. So all this while we've been in the wilderness with you, you've taken us around the mountain. So you've knowingly taken us around the mountain. In fact, Kenyans should be angered by whatever the president was saying. That was not a good thing.
Hold still. You are Jubilee. Your president is saying that you're on a mountaintop. But we know in the land of Moab, the children of Israel had been in that desert for 40 years.
Yeah.
Are we saying that the Jubilee government has been taking us round and round via the mountains and the desert for 40 years? 7 years now. Is that what you Jubilee people are telling us? Because you're Jubilee.
First and foremost, I want to tell you that what the president meant is about transition. And the transition he's talking about, and the BBI agenda that he is pushing is not for himself. It's not to benefit him. It's not for him to become in one of the senior position. It is about the future of our country. What the president is talking about, whatever that he is doing, is not for the benefit of himself and his close people, but because of the betterment and a better future for our country. We are talking about
7 years, Governor. 7 years.
We're talking about making sure that we don't have violence every other time we do an election. That is not about him. It is about our country. And he is saying that if we're able to put this BBI report and organize it well and improve areas of weakness in our constitution, we will have a better tomorrow.
Fred, let me just tell you, those who have studied, for instance, Raila Odinga, know how he's very good at creating messages. He's very good at creating messages. And so when he created the Joshua Canaan message, it went down to the very heart of the people. And I can assure you that the Moses message, that sounded like the NASA speechwriter might have been the one who wrote that. And I can assure you, you will hear it in BBI rallies. You will hear the story of Moses and Joshua in the BBI rallies and crossing to Canaan, the promised land. Because the president said he's at the mountaintop. He has seen the promised land. I can assure you that we will hear this story in a lot of BBI rallies.
All right.
I will be here.
Before we take this short break, remember, I asked you earlier on, how would you rate the president the last 7 years? 1 being the poorest, and 7 or 10 being the very best. How would you rate him? Text us on 111 444 111. When we come back, we'll be talking about this new Joshua. Remember, in 2017, Raila Odinga was the Joshua. And we know after Moses died on that mountain, we know who took over. What are we being told? We'll be back in a short while. And welcome back to Tipping Point. My name is Frederick Muitiriri. Earlier on, I asked you, how would you rate President Kenyatta's performance in the last 7 years out of 10? 1 being the poorest and 10 being the very best. And some of your SMSs, and there are many, they are here. This one is saying I would give him a 3. Another one is saying a 4. 8%. The other 2% ni mambo ya corruption bado. And from Kirinyaga. 2%. You didn't tell me who you are. I rate my president at 4 out of 10 because in his long speech, he never addressed corruption, which is key in development. Very disappointed, especially in that matter. A case of KEMSA, Josephat Clement from Kisii, Omogon Chokoro. Sawa Jemo, asante. And the Josephat, Uhuru presidency, Tatu, Safi. Unfortunately, it was empty, just reputation, nothing intriguing. My rate is 1. Kevin, 1. Moja. Kema simama moja. Hello Switch. The guests today are awesome. We salute them. As for rating, I give Uhunye's regime 3 out of 10. Worst government ever. Siyamalize tu aende. It's not I, it's being written here. Michael from Ruai. This government, I'm rating it at 4 out of 10. All they do is enjoying their lives and don't even care about the Kenyans. On education, you cannot talk about education without considering the welfare of teachers. At the moment, the two ziko hivi. Payslip. Oh, State House copied the speech from Martin Luther. Uhuru prophesied about BBI will fall. It has no future. Okay, Jim. Let me start with the deputy governor. In what the president said in his speech about being the Moses, we know after the death of Moses, who took over? It was Joshua. In 2017, we know who was calling himself Joshua. Are we being told in a way that the person who is going to take the mantle is Raila Odinga in 2022 after the president has kaput? How we say it in the streets.
Baba has not talked about the Joshua again. So we are not sure whether he is the Joshua again, because the Joshua ended when he found
the handshake.
The crocodiles in the river, in River Jordan. But now the president is the Moses. We don't know yet who the Joshua will be. Anyone can be the Joshua. And any Joshua who will come after the Moses, our president, will find a land full of honey and milk, a brighter and a better future for our country. Whatever the president is doing, and the intentions of the president is to have a better Kenya. Perhaps what has hindered him from delivering as much as he would wish to is because of the current situation. Talk of corruption.
I thought you would say COVID-19. I actually thought you would say COVID-19.
The BBI effort is to ensure that corruption is dealt with. Talk of the issues of campaigns and violence in our country. BBI seeks to cure the problems that our country has been going through. Talk of unity.
And because you're talking about BBI, the president, just the other day at the Bomas of Kenya, said this of his deputy about the baton. And this is what the president had to say about his deputy, whom the Jubilee followers thought he would be the next Joshua.
Race hii ni ile ya kuhandover, unajua? Si ndio? Inaitwa relay. Unakimbia ule mwingine anakugojea pale, anatakikana kukugojea ndio ashike aendelee, si ndio? Lakini sasa my brother William hapa amepinduka, anakimbia nyuma.
Jim, isn't that are those not signs that we have a new Joshua in the name of Raila Odinga? You can tell what he's saying. That he's going, Ruto is going on this other direction, but I am the Moses and Joshua is coming.
I hear what the president says, and I would really be skeptical about buying that narrative, because it's a narrative that wants to box Kenyans into thinking that they have two options in 2022. They have William Ruto and Raila Odinga, and that's it. And so locks out any other candidate who wants to come into this race, locks out any other option that Kenyans want to have for themselves, and effectively suppresses the whole process of elections and democracy in any country. Because it is, if you talk about, so basically at Bomas he told us William is a candidate. Today, if we are to interpret what he said well, he's told us that Joshua Raila Odinga is a candidate. Now that essentially locks that race, and so then the media will start saying there's a two-horse race. what that does is it locks out every other candidate and suppresses the choice of Kenyans to have more options than that. So it's a very scary narrative for me. And I do not even fancy a Raila Odinga presidency or a Ruto presidency just because we have seen the kind of mess that the two are able to create when they have an opportunity to be in power.
In a short while, we'll be talking about the BBI and the changes that are supposed to be there. And I'll be telling you what Raila Odinga said earlier this week about the changes in the BBI. But these are your SMSs. The president has done a lot. I rate him at 7. But whatever he has done can't be seen as of now. James Karangu, I do not know what you're saying, but yes, 7. President Uhuru scores a clean moja, just like the Joker. I will not say what you are saying. Brian from Kisumu, Uhuru has done nothing but make life more unbearable. I give him a 2 star. Okay, hey guys, I'm rating Uhuru 0 out of 10. Hata kama tuko na amani. Hata kama. He has mutated the delivery of the divisive BBI. Okay. Raila Odinga has said that there will be no changes in the BBI report as it is. And this is what he had to say. There is significantly little chance of significant new ideas being brought into the BBI document ahead of the referendum, except the editorial work to make it explicit on demands by various groups where it sounds vague or general. In just a few minutes, you in Jubilee, do you feel that we should have some consensus? We should just bring Kenyans together if there are issues they feel, because the church has spoken. People living with disabilities, they have spoken. The deputy president has spoken about the report. Do you feel it should be amended?
Absolutely. I think when the president launched the BBI report in Bomas, the slogan that was going around is kila mtu ajisome. I think you are to read where we feel as a country needs more improvement, because it is just a draft. It is just a report. We can better that report before we subject it to a referendum. And the president himself and Honorable Raila Odinga has been meeting various groups. The other day he was with the pastoralist leaders. He was supposed to join us, governors and deputy governors, and also CAF in Naivasha.
Why do you think they did not show up? And you've been close, you will not be using the Bomas. You wanted a meeting.
They didn't appear because
what was the reason? You were given a reason.
The three groups, there are a number of areas we could easily agree on, and there are a number of areas we could not agree on. So that I think that was a best idea for the principals not to appear. We just need to hand over whatever we have agreed on and whatever that we have not agreed on, and hand it over to them and the entire BBI team.
Jim, tumesikia maoni ya Wakenya, si mara moja. There was the first report that was given. Kenyans gave their views. The second report, Kenyans gave their views. Are we going to keep on giving our views and giving our views and giving our views? What do you think there's a problem in the new BBI report?
One, the statement from Raila was very arrogant in nature. And I'd like to remind him that this document does not belong to him. It is not his document. This document belongs to us, the people. This document was created by people we pay to create. It was funded by the taxpayers' money. So anyone telling us that there's no chance to make any, who told them that there's no chance? This document belongs to us, the people. We will say when there's no chance to make any amendments to it. We will say when it is time to pass it. We will say when we want to reject it.
But for how long are we going to do this? How long are we going to do this?
No, we can do it as long as we want, because number one,
in that 30 seconds, because I'm being told that my time is up.
I think what the Prime Minister meant is not actually to say that there is no chance of...
He said that. He said that.
I don't think that is what he means. I think what he means, there are some groups that wants to go through that entire document and want to rewrite it. I think the time that we have, we cannot be able to rewrite that document.
Your last view, your last take in like 30 seconds to maliza hii show. At the end of the day, are we going to go back to Bomas again to rewrite another report?
I think the views that have been given so far are enough, because if I take an example of us deputy governors and governors sitting in Naivasha, we went through a number of areas, and we jotted down areas that we thought needed improvement before we take it. So my last words is I would urge the president and Honorable Raila Odinga to take into account the views that has been given by various groups.
Let me just cut you short.
Thank you. Asante.
My country people, I've seen a lot of anger in comments. I wish we could translate that anger into real action, especially with your vote.
The views expressed in this show are not of Switch TV, but individual views. So, hatutapelekwa kotini. Thank you so very much, Jim India, of course, from the Emerging Leaders Foundation and Deputy Governor, all the way from Kajiado County, Martin Moshisho. Asanteni sana for your time. I do appreciate. We'll see each other next week by the grace of God. To our viewers, asanteni sana for watching us. My name is Frederick Muitiriri. Our sign language interpreters tonight was Teresia Washira and Michael Maithia. Good night.